I'm here to speak about a topic that some would call provocative, controversial, that has become very well known, but is filled with stereotypes and different ideas and concepts and myths and beliefs. It is called the topic of Mashiach. Some call it the Messiah, some call it the future of the world, the end of days. Some think of it as an apocalyptic context. There are many, many views on the future. Where are we headed? What is the end of the world going to look like? Every major religion has its theories on the topic. Judaism, of course, Christianity, Islam, the Far Eastern disciplines, and within each of them there are many different variations. So I would like to present the Torah perspective on this topic, which hopefully is both relevant and provocative, and above all, drives us all and motivates us to do something about it. So generally speaking, let me just begin with a general introduction about stereotypes. Whenever we talk about any particular issue, especially one that is fraught with all kinds of opinions, God, religion, faith, Messiah, Moshiach, immediately you can rest assured that it's going to be filled with stereotypes. Meaning everyone has different versions of it, and how does one select and how does one define which way to look at it? There are people who are adamant believers in God. There are people who are adamant non-believers. There are people who are agnostic. There are those who are undecided. But everybody's got an opinion. So there's a famous story with the Rabbi Yitzchak, a great Hasidic Rebbe of the 18th century, that he had a neighbor who was a self-proclaimed atheist. And this neighbor was once invited by the rabbi to come to synagogue for high holiday services. And he tells the rabbi, I'm an atheist, I don't believe. I like you, but just to go ahead and pay lip service doesn't feel right. And Rabbi Yitzchak answered to this fellow, he says, the God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. You hear that? God you don't believe in, I also don't believe in. Basically stating a very simple but profound truth. And that truth is that before we get into debates and arguments about an issue, we have to first define the issue. So when you say the word God, God exists. Well, if the definition of God is a man with a long white beard in heaven that strikes us with lightning when we misbehave, many people would consider themselves atheists, including myself. But if God is understood as a essence of all reality, the deeper reality of all of existence, then you're talking about a different type of definition. So when we talk about the concept of Mashiach, Messiah, it's critical to define what we mean and what we don't mean, because it's filled with different opinions. Let's be honest, for the last few thousand years, the monopoly, most of the people speaking of the Messiah, is connected to Christianity. So most people have an attitude based on the Christian version of what that Messiah is. I'm not obviously here to go talk about, criticize or to promote that particular version, but we cannot deny the fact that it has affected culture, it has affected our thinking, it has affected literature, and many of us see it as some type of miraculous event, a resurrection connected with apocalypse, with wars, with bloodshed. The Torah version happens to be completely different. So I'm here to try to bring clarity and to dispel some of the myths and get to the core essence of what this word is, what this concept is. And it's critical to strip it from any type of preconceived notion. So I ask all of you, as you listen to this, that at least for the next short while, try to empty your minds, if you can, about preconceived notions about Mashiach, about Messiah, about the end of days. And let's try to look at it from a fresh perspective, clean slate. And then, of course, you can bring back your old ideas and see how they fit in or don't fit in. But that, I believe, is the healthiest thing to do, especially when you're talking about a topic that is fraught with all kinds of different myths and different images and stereotypes. So in that context, let's speak in plain simple English. What is this idea called end of days, Messiah? From a skeptic's point of view, you can argue that there is no such thing as end of days. Maybe one day scientifically the sun may burn out, and that will be the end. They predict that to happen millions of years from now. But what is this concept? The world has existed, and the world will continue to roll on unless we human beings in some way destroy ourselves, God forbid. Yet there is a concept in religious doctrine, and I begin with the Jewish doctrine, which is that in the Bible, in the Torah, God tells us that there will be a redemption, there will be an end to the world as we know it, and we'll enter into a new age, what's called the Messianic age, a new consciousness, a new age of consciousness, a new paradigm shift, which we shall discuss. So I don't want to go into a polemic here of trying to prove this, but I do want to present it in a rational and logical way. And a few axioms have to be put into place. Axiom number one is the context of purpose. Does life have purpose? So if you're a skeptic or a person who denies or does not accept that life has purpose, obviously many of the other ideas that I'm going to be sharing will fall. So there are axioms that I'd like to put into place, and they are axioms based on Torah thinking, and they make a lot of sense. But here's not the scope to argue about every axiom, so let me just state my axioms. Axiom number one is that life has purpose. Life has design. That there's a God that put this universe in place. That each of us is on a particular mission. We each have an indispensable role to play in the unfolding drama of human experience. That we have a purpose of elevating the material world, transforming it into a spiritual environment. Now, this isn't unique to Judaism. This is a concept that many people has captured the imagination of many. Some don't even call themselves religious. The idea that we are here to somewhat repair this world, tikkun olam, somewhere to make this world into a garden. It could be a jungle. Self-interest and selfish and narcissistic drives can self-destruct us, can destroy each other, we can destroy ourselves. Or we can live a life where we work in unison, where we coordinate our efforts, where we complement each other, and we see each other as different musical notes in one large composition. And as such, we play music, and we turn this world into a garden. This is the axiom and the attitude and approach that essentially the Torah view on life. Which means that every one of you, every one of us, everyone everywhere, every individual is a flower waiting to emerge, is a musical note waiting to play its song, is a entity waiting to express its voice and make this world a more beautiful place. And we do that through our own personal lives, our family lives, our communal lives, our social lives, and our business lives. And if every individual did this in their own personal life, in their own community, globally, we would have a shift of consciousness, a shift of awareness. So in that context, the idea of a Messianic world, the idea of Mashiach, the idea of a redemption, is the end of that process. So think of it this way. God is the cosmic designer that put this universe in place, gave each of us a mission, sent our souls to this earth to actualize our potential and to beautify, to refine, to spiritualize our environment. And the Messianic world, the world of Mashiach, is essentially the destination. And when all of this will come to fruition. So it's a logical sequence. If God is the cosmic designer, and the world has a purpose and design, and we are the instruments, the agents of change, the agents of beautifying, we're the gardeners that turn this world and cut out the weeds and bring out the flowers, then the Messianic world is when we realize our dreams and aspirations, when we realize the purpose of why we're here. So therefore, it is a fundamental principle in Jewish faith, as Maimonides spells out in his 13 principles, to believe, ani mamin, I believe with complete faith that Mashiach will come. And he equates it with the belief in God, equates it with the belief in the Torah. Why? Because they're all part of one picture. Imagine this. Imagine someone is driving a train, and the train is a beautiful train, but there's no destination. There's something wrong with that type of driver. So the idea that there's a God, that God created the universe for purpose, and that we are part of that purpose, but there's no destination, essentially undermines the whole purpose of the design. It's like saying we will never reach our goals. No business, no corporation, no entity would tolerate such a concept, that you just exist and you'll never reach your goal. There are goals to be met. So the concept of Mashiach, therefore, is integral to the concept of purpose design. It is the fulfillment of the purpose of this universe. It's the fulfillment of your purpose and my purpose. Which brings me to an interesting take on this. I would say if you strip the word Mashiach from our vocabulary, from our conversation, each of us aspires to something that's very similar. We aspire to a better world. We aspire to better lives. We dedicate our lives to help our children and our families live better than we did. We have hope that the world will be a better place. And you see this consistently. You see it in all the isms throughout history, where people embraced, even to the point of obsession, of doing something of social justice or some other social revolution to change the world for the better. I submit that this is essentially the spark that each of us has in the belief and faith that there is going to be a better world, what we call the world of Mashiach. There's a doctor I know. He's a doctor, a research doctor, and a very noble man, and he taken upon himself several years ago to conquer a few diseases in his lifetime. Not the major and most difficult ones. He took a few diseases that most of us are not familiar with, and he does research. He has made it a goal in his lifetime to conquer these diseases and eradicate them. Find a cure which has not been found yet, and eradicate them. He calls himself an atheist. He comes to my classes. I know him personally well. And he was always telling me that he likes my classes, but he doesn't believe in God. He definitely doesn't believe in the ideas of Mashiach, the ideas of that we're coming to a better world and stuff like that. And I always chuckled to myself. So once he asked me, why are you smiling? I said, very simple, you're the biggest believer in Mashiach I've ever met. He said, what are you talking about? I'm a non-believer. I said, you've dedicated your entire life to finding a cure to diseases that no one has ever found. Why don't you just resign yourself to the fact that maybe some diseases are not conquerable? Maybe you can't vanquish these illnesses. Life is not fair always. Survival of the fittest. Who says justice prevails? Who says that every hope is going to be fulfilled, that every aspiration and dream will be realized? Maybe this is just a act of folly. All your efforts are in vain. He says, no, I know I can conquer it. I said, to me, this is a radical. You're a radical fanatic. The word fanatic, fan, is short for fanatic. But you never hear anyone say sports fanatic and religious fan. Say sports fans and religious fanatics. But this is a fanatic because it's not rational. And he doesn't even realize the paradox. Here's a man who says he doesn't believe, a man who doesn't have faith in his mind, and yet he has complete faith and hope. He's determined and convinced that he can conquer these illnesses. Based on what rationale? Maybe some illnesses can be conquered. So I submit to him and to all of us that each of us has within us, in our spirit, that type of unwavering belief in something that can be achieved, that will make the world a better place. That is, in essence, in the kernel of believing in Mashiach. So we don't have to embrace some type of new religious doctrine, some type of supernatural accepting with blind faith some new ideas. Just look into your own heart and soul. Are there things that you're ready to fight for and die for even? Hopes, aspirations for yourself, for your children, for family, for friends. Unfortunately, we live in a comfortable world. I'd say, unfortunately, it's really a great blessing, but comfort tends to create also apathy and complacency. Like the guy asked his friend, what's worse, apathy or ignorance? And he said, I don't know and I don't care. Apathy is this type of complacency and indifference that doesn't push us and compel us and propel us to do something better. So it's true that many of us growing up in our world today don't have a cause to fight for. But the concept we all understand. It's important to have some passion that we fight for. Many of us do it for money, for other things. But deep in our hearts, we all have a certain belief that the world should be a better place. That's why we're outraged when there's injustice. We're outraged when we see innocent people suffering, when we see children, defenseless children, being hurt. Why are we outraged? Why not just say survival of the fittest? We live in a world dog eats dog. It's a jungle. People are driven by narcissism. Nobility, selflessness, giving, that's the anomaly. Because there's something inside of us that resonates with saying, no, that's not the anomaly. The anomaly is greed, is selfishness. The fact that many people are selfish and greedy, that doesn't mean that it doesn't grate on our nerves and doesn't mean that it resonates. we all resonate with the idea of a world where people are more giving. And you see the world has evolved in that direction. So, first point here, to sum up in this discussion, is the idea that each of us has within us a type of hope and aspiration for a better type of world. It links in to the concept of Mashiach, the concept of a Messianic world where we will come to the fruition of the design and purpose of existence. And I explained it specifically in a way that is not based on pure blind faith. There's a certain logic to it. Of course, it's built on axioms, and I define those axioms as well. With that being said, let's move over to step number 2. So what is this world like? What does this world look like? When all our dreams will be realized, when the world will reach that type of perfection, what kind of world is it like? So that's what I want to address in this second section of this discussion. So this brings us back to what is the design, what is the purpose? So if you recall, I stated that the purpose is spiritualizing the material world. So let me elaborate a bit about that. We live in a world where there is definitely a battle. There's a conflict. This conflict is within our own psyches. It's a conflict within our communities and our families, within the world. And that's why we have conflicts. We have battles that we wage. The conflict begins in a subtle form. It begins with a conflict between two voices within each of us. Will I spend my time just to take care of my own needs? Or will I spend my time to serve and help others? In other words, are we here only to serve ourselves, self-centered or God-centered? Or are we here to serve something greater than ourselves? Now, it's not mutually exclusive. The fact is we have both voices. And I would submit that most of us at times gravitate to one direction or the other. But there is a conflict. The conflict can be someone invites you tomorrow morning, early on, we'd like you to come with us, volunteers, to go visit some sick people in the hospital. So there's a voice in you that says, that's very admirable, I'd love to do it, help people, I feel good about the idea. Another voice says, you know what, I want to sleep an extra hour. I'm lazy. Someone else can do it. We all have these, I'm just giving a small example. We have examples like this throughout the day, throughout our lives, hundreds, thousands of times. A decision, a fork in the road. Yogi Berra said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. But in this case, you can't just take both directions. We choose one or the other. And this really defines our lives. It defines what the purpose of our lives. Many of us, who may even act selfishly, and we all have times that we do, know better that's not really what you want to do, but that's what you end up gravitating to because it's the easier path. But the road less traveled, which makes all the difference, is the path that we choose, which may take a little more effort. And at the moment may not feel so good, but long term it feels great. Because if you wake up early in that morning and do visit the sick, guarantee the rest of your day you're going to feel good about it. If you sleep an extra hour, that hour you may feel good, but the rest of the day you're not going to feel that great if you're sensitive and conscientious. So we have decisions like this all the time. Think of it as the decision whether you're going to follow your soul or you're going to follow your body. Body here in the context of your material needs, the moment, the here and now, instant gratification, what I want now, or the soul, which thinks of the bigger picture, which thinks of what is my purpose, why am I here? And we have the two voices within us. One is reflective, one is impulsive. And most of the time we gravitate toward the impulsive, to whatever comes our way. But there's another voice, the voice of the soul, that keeps us awake to the fact that there are other people in the world. There are people who may be hurt, there are people who are needy, that we are here also to help each other. And this is a battle that goes on in each of our lifetimes, and when you magnify this battle, you end up looking at the conflicts that take place in communities, in homes and communities in the larger world, different interests. Everyone has their interest. Everyone thinks their interest is the most important one. Your interests conflict mine, so battle breaks out. It can be a physical battle, it can be an emotional battle, it can be a subtle battle, a diplomatic one, but they're battles. When every human being on this earth would think in terms of what is the purpose, why I'm here, and they would think in terms of how do we complement each other, what is my individual music to play, as I mentioned, what is my flower, and how are the other music and flowers in the world, how do they complement each other, then we're talking about a world that's living up to its purpose. So what is the world of Mashiach? Mashiach is essentially the accumulation of enough choices of people following the voice of their soul as opposed to the voice of their body. Enough voices following the voice of their spiritual calling and higher calling than their self-interest, the moment of self-interest. When that accumulates, think of it like building blocks, and the sum total of them all is a structure. It's called a better world. It's a world where the world becomes a garden because enough flowers have emerged. Michelangelo once said, when they asked him, how does he sculpt these beautiful images out of stone? He says, I see the angel trapped in the marble, and I carved and set her free. So this world is a very hard crust world that conceals and hides the flowers within, the angels within, the music within. And it's our work in that battle that I described is to allow our angel and the angel of others to emerge. When enough angels emerge, when enough flowers emerge, you have a Messianic world. Which leads me to a critical point in the Jewish view of Mashiach, a Messiah. The Jewish view is that Mashiach is not just an event. It's a process. It's a process that began at the beginning of time. When Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden were charged, la'avda l'shamra, to serve and to protect, to make this world a garden, basi ligani, God says, Garden of Eden, make the entire world a garden. They began the first building blocks, the first steps toward a Messianic world. Unfortunately, it's because there was another voice that misled them, a voice that was more selfish, that was more concerned with their immediate needs, that also concealed the garden. Thus, they had to be expelled from it, cause and effect. And the process ever since of human beings, every mitzvah, every good deed, every time we overcome the temptation for self-interest and do something for another, every time we do something, whatever mitzvah it may be, we have revealed a spark of Mashiach in this world. We've revealed a spark of godliness. And when enough sparks are revealed, the process concludes with a natural conclusion. What happens in the natural conclusion? Like in the good sense, a volcano erupts, not because suddenly one morning there was pressure. It's a cumulative pressure, cumulative forces, a cumulative heat that finally bursts and erupts. In this context, it's a good eruption. Enough good is revealed in this world, enough flowers, enough music, enough sparks, it accumulates into the world of Mashiach. But it's not just a process, it's a process that leads to an event. Why is this critical? Because many see the concept of Mashiach as being, okay, it's some type of thing that's going to happen. And either it will or it won't, and we'll see what happens. No. In Jewish thought, we are a dynamic and integral part of it happening. It doesn't just happen. It's part of a process. And when the process comes to its conclusion, the world naturally erupts, and those sparks are naturally revealed. And that's a Messianic world. And then there are events that will take place as a result of this end of this process. There will be an actual Mashiach. We'll talk about that in a few moments. So this is the description of the world. Will basically be, to sum up, a world where spirit dominates over matter. To cite and quote Maimonides, the Rambam, at the end of his book of laws, he says that at the end of days, the Messianic world, it will be a world where materialism will not be seen as an end in itself. It will be seen as a means to a higher end, to know God. And he cites the verse from Isaiah, a world filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. It will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea, that everyone will see this be the same world as we know it. He makes it very clear we don't have to have miracles. We definitely don't have to have destruction or apocalypse. We don't have an Armageddon. It can be a very natural world. And essentially, it's a change of consciousness. It's a revolution of consciousness. It's a paradigm shift that instead of materialism being an end in itself, which is really the driving cardinal rule and driving force of our life today, in Messianic times, the material pursuits will be an end, a means to knowing God. That in everything we do, we will see higher purpose. We'll recognize it. And as a result, there will be no more war and no more famine and no more unhealthy competition and jealousy and so on. Because the beginning of the verse that I cited from Isaiah that Maimonides brings says, they will no longer do evil and destructive things on my holy mountain, because the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. We know different prophecies like their swords will be turned into plowshares. Many of these are all based on the same idea that the material world will become suddenly a means, a tool, not for weapons, but for plowshares, for gardening, for harvesting grain and so on. What's the connection between no destruction and a world filled with divine knowledge? We see many people that have knowledge, and it doesn't necessarily make them better people. Sometimes more knowledge created more destruction, more sophisticated weapons. It says divine knowledge. When people are filled with divine knowledge, meaning the sense that I am here as a divine agent, I'm here to serve a higher purpose, when there's that type of knowledge, automatically that creates the ability to tolerate, not just to tolerate, to coexist, to value everyone around you, because they also have a divine calling. And when all of us cumulatively in the world feel that way, you have a world that naturally will not have war. Because when you see that another person is part of you, imagine of different organs in one body, a healthy body, each organ has its role, but each one also respects and understands the role of another, and that's what turns us all into one healthy body. That's the world of Mashiach, a world in harmony, a world the way it was always meant to be, nothing new. On the contrary, the anomaly is the greed and the forces of destructive forces that tear us apart. The natural world, the way it was meant to be, is when things are aligned. So God created the universe for a purpose. Think of it as a very healthy machine. The machine has wandered off its course. Life has wandered off its course. Mashiach is bringing it back to its proper alignment, where everything we do is aligned with its purpose. Who you are is aligned with what you do. That means not just your work, but everything that you're involved in is all connected to the real you, the soul, the purpose of your existence. So that covers somewhat what that world will look like. Now let's address some specifics about the process that I mentioned, and some of the specifics of what will take place. As I said, besides the process, there are events. Now, just to in a sense, summarize, I see it this way. If Mashiach is the way I just described it, then it's quite an exciting journey. Would really want to entice each of us to be part of this, because it's about self-actualizing who you are, discovering your deeper purpose, discovering the purpose of other people around you, and accumulatively bringing on a world that will be, in a sense, in touch with its deeper purpose and higher calling. So that's something that should intrigue us, not something that should terrify us. Definitely not something we should be complacent about. It's something we are part of, and we, as I said, are part of the dynamic process of the unfolding of this drama. So, generally speaking, there are 4 theories on the Messianic world and different religions and different schools of thought. And obviously the one I'm talking about is the Jewish perspective, the Torah perspective, which is the 4th of these 4 schools of thought. But just to appreciate it, let me put it into contrast. There are one school of thought, well, it's 2 schools that really break down into 4. 2, that each one has another 2 subcategories. The 2 general categories is Mashiach, is the end of time, something that will be violent or peaceful. That's 2 different ways, either violent or peaceful. Aggressive or peaceful. Violent or peaceful. And another 2 options, will it be passive or will it be aggressive? Or I should rather say, instead of aggressive, proactive. Or will it just happen, or do we do something about it? So of course this breaks into 4 schools of thought. One says, we'll start from the extreme, there will be a violent ending, and then one that is aggressive, one that is proactive. That means there'll be a war. You've heard of the rapture, you've heard of these books that talk about the end of days, of a time when there'll be an Armageddon, an apocalypse, a war, weeding out the wicked, and so on. And this war will be led by crusaders, or whoever you want to call them, whatever you want to call them, people who will lead the way to destroy the evil in the world. There's that school of thought. Obviously very violent ending, very bloody one, and one that is proactive, is initiated by people. There's another school of thought that feels the same way, but they say it's passive. Instead of seeing that end of days as something we initiate, God will initiate it. It won't be initiated by people. We just stand by, but there will be a violent ending, a war, Again, bloody, difficult to experience, and so on. That's two schools of thought. Then there's the other school that the end will be a peaceful one. And here too, some say it will be passive. It will just come to be. This garden, this divine home, this universe will happen on its own. And we are passive bystanders. And the fourth school of thought, and this is the Torah Jewish one, that says that it will be peaceful, no need for war, but it will be one that's proactive. We are involved in the process. What do we do to bring it on? We do, as I said earlier, every good deed we do, dedicated to understanding that we're here to reveal the angels, the music, the flowers. Those deeds directly impact the coming of Mashiach. In Tanya, which is the classic work of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the founder of Chabad Hasidism, known sometimes as the Bible of Hasidus, Tanya, that is. So in chapter 36, where he talks about the purpose of existence, he continues into chapter 37. And to cite the first opening line, and this is something you could all look up, it is, you can find it online, the English translations of Tanya, which is original Hebrew, where he says that this days of Mashiach, the Messianic age, is dependent on Ma'aseinu v'Avodaseinu, on our actions and our work. Why? Because the mitzvah itself reveals a piece of Mashiach. So it's cause and effect. If you want a world, a divine world, you want a world of goodness, you have to reveal that goodness. And it's our Ma'aseinu v'Avodaseinu that directly is the impetus, is the catalyst that awakens and ignites the sparks, and accumulatively, as I mentioned, that lead us to this bigger world called the Messianic world, which, of course, then compels us all to do something about all of this, which we shall soon discuss as well, what we can do. But before we go to that, let me talk a little more about some of the details of this Messianic age. So how will this age come to be? Now, everything we talk about is not speculation, it's not based on conjecture. It's based on the Torah documents, texts, prophecies. Essentially, God told us how it will come to be. Now, I mentioned how it will come to be through our work, but what will be the so-called technical steps? So we have a precedent, even though it's not in the full-blown sense of Mashiach, but we have a precedent. The precedent is called Ki Meitzescha Me'eretz Mitzrayim Arenu Neflois. It's a verse in the book of Micha where he says, just as in the days when you left Egypt, I will show you wonders in the future. So basically, Messianic age is we have a preview of it in the Exodus from Egypt. Obviously, as I qualified it with distinctions, but the idea is a redemption from a sense of slavery. Then the slavery and bondage was physical as well. They were enslaved to the Egyptians, but it was also a spiritual bondage. There was a lack of confidence. They began to think like slaves, and it was about freeing their minds and souls and hearts to know that we are here to serve God, not to serve other human beings. So the same is true in the final redemption. As I said, compared to the redemption from Egypt, that we too come to a type of emancipation, a spiritual emancipation, that you can dream and aspire to anything you wish. Nothing is impossible. And we can change this world, and this time forever. Whereas the Exodus from Egypt they left Egypt and opened up the door of freedom, but did not emancipate the world yet. Another comparison is that when they left Egypt, they were led by an individual, a man of flesh and blood. His name was Moses. So obviously God could have taken the Jews out of Egypt on his own, but he wanted a human being, a model, a role model, a transparent tzaddik, meaning a person whose life is completely aligned to spiritual focus and to the divine calling, to lead them out and show the example of how a human being should live on this earth. Same thing, Goyal Rishon, Hu Goyal Achron, just like the first Redeemer is compared to this last Redeemer. Mashiach is similar, a man of flesh and blood. Maimonides spells it out in, as I mentioned, the end of the laws of Kings, in the end of his Mishnah Torah, a man of flesh and blood, born to a father and mother, a man who's not an angel, born to the house of David, his lineage. A person will be dedicated to Torah mitzvahs, completely dedicated. A person will be committed to spreading and bringing those Torah mitzvahs and inspiring the world. So not just about a self-contained individual, but someone who cares and is interested in inspiring and influencing the world, and will be successful at that. And that, Maimonides says, designates a person to be what's called Cheskas Mashiach. A person who can be presumed to be the Mashiach. But then come a few other steps, including the victory over a war, which doesn't specifically state what kind of war, but it's not the war that I mentioned, a bloody war necessarily. It can be a spiritual type of war, a war against ignorance, a war against indifference, and so on. And then, here are the final steps. He will gather all the Jews back to Israel and will rebuild the third temple. Then you know that he's the definite Messiah, the definite Mashiach. A person who's helped usher in the event that is the conclusion of a process. But it's not Mashiach that does it all, as I said. This is a cumulative process of thousands of years and millions of souls that have toiled and worked hard at bringing goodness into this world. Mashiach is the leader that ushers in this new age, this new consciousness. So that designates what kind of the steps that will take place. There are many more other steps. Some are not very clear. Some we're not even aware of. Some we don't know about. What I'm sharing is what we know, what has been told to us. And above all, as I said, what our role in all of this is, which is what we should be doing. So let's talk about that, what our role in all of this is. So obviously, the commitment to goodness and kindness. When CNN came by Sunday Dollars, Lubavitcher Rebbe, many years ago, and they asked him, what is his message to the world about Mashiach? So he said, Mashiach is on his way, and what we have to do is to speed up his coming, is to increase in acts of goodness and kindness. That was the Rebbe's statement. Sounds simple, but he said goodness and kindness. As I said before, we have a battle going on in our lives all the time. When enough people will follow the voice of good over selfish, we tip the scale. But we have to look at ourselves. It's not about quantity. The tipping point does not mean you have to change the whole world immediately. To reach a critical mass begins by reaching your own internal critical mass, where you resolve and you say, you know what, I really believe in this, but I'm ready to act on my belief. Enough of us feel that way, we make a difference. Today, that's not such a surprising thing, even though there's 6 billion people on this planet. We all know of the concept of a butterfly effect. We know the concept that small things make big differences. The butterfly effect can be the fluttering of a butterfly, for whatever reason they say, in Kansas City can create a typhoon in Singapore. In other words, we once lived in a world where size mattered. Something bigger was stronger. Greater weapons were the largest ones. Today, that's not the case. The greatest weapons, actually, are the ones that are invisible. Unleash, God forbid, some type of bacteria, some type of virus, which you can't even see. You can cause much more damage than the strongest tanks and Air Force and the Navy and armies. We know in the human body, the DNA, the cell structure, things that are invisible to the naked eye. They shape everything. Look at your own computer. Look at the microchip. The manipulation of microscopic particles, subatomic particles, have unleashed nuclear energy, unleashed forces that are never imaginable. So to underestimate the power of one deed is not so wise in these days. One little act changes things. I remember traveling once to north Minnesota. Don't ask me what I was doing there, but I was there. And a fellow showed me, a local said, I want to show you something. And he took me to a little area where I saw a very small little flow of water, barely, how can I say, like a trickle of water coming over the Canadian border into Minnesota. And then he put his foot in it. He put his foot there and put a stick. And he says, if I stand here long enough, the Mississippi River will dry up. Because this was the beginnings of the waters that would ultimately feed into the Mississippi. Now, obviously, if he stood there long enough, it would start building up and building up. I don't think he would be able to remain standing. But what struck me was that some of the biggest things in the world start somewhere with a trickle. One little shift somewhere. And it can turn into the most mighty force. We see the might, but we don't see the roots of things. The greatest people on earth all began, like all of us, humbly emerging from our mother's womb. Little baby. who knows what potential that little child had. And I speak for the good. Obviously, there's unfortunately also for the bad. So to underestimate the power of one person or the power of one deed is absolutely insanity in a world like ours. And that's what Judaism teaches. Maimonides says that a person has to always perceive themselves as, and the world and themselves as equally balanced. Like think of a scale where the merits and the negative elements are equally balanced. They balance each other out. And your one act tips the scale. So yes, we can say, what significance am I, one person in a world of 6 point whatever billion people? What can I achieve? But if you think of it that way, the power of the detail, the power of your specific act, yes, we can change the world. And remember, we're also midgets that stand on the shoulders of giants. We're not coming alone. We're not in a vacuum. We are part of an accumulative process of millions and millions of beautiful deeds and noble acts that our parents and ancestors have done. And we are midgets that stand on their shoulders. Even though it's attributed to Isaac Newton, that an analogy is given by one of the great scholars in the Middle Ages, but long before Isaac Newton. And therefore we can see further than those giants because we stand on their shoulders. So we don't come alone, we come with that power. Think of it like a marathon. And now the leg of the marathon is given to us. The baton has been passed to our generation. So I ask each of us, I ask myself, think about this. All the generations in history wait to see how you and I will act. Our small act is the thing that can tip the scale from a world that leads this universe into a Messianic age, a world of higher spiritual consciousness. And so ultimately comes down to individuals like us. It's not just about global campaigns, and it's not just about reaching millions of people. It's reaching individual one after one. Because remember, at the end of the day, 6 billion people on this planet are basically 6 billion individuals like you and I. So if each one of us does our little part, it has great power. Thank you very much.